February 1943, 30,000 feet above Nazi Germany. Inside the cramped tail section of a B-17 flying fortress, Michael Romano grips his 50-caliber machine guns with frozen fingers. Through the plexiglass bubble surrounding him, he watches a Messerschmitt Bf-109 diving toward his bomber at 300 miles per hour. He has perhaps 3 seconds to react. 3 seconds between life and death. Romano squints through his ring and post sight. The crude metal rings wobble as he tries to track the enemy fighter. The German pilot knows what Romano doesn't yet understand. The American tail gunner is almost blind. This is the reality of the air war over Europe in 1943. The United States 8th Air Force is sending hundreds of B-17 bombers deep into German territory, striking factories, rail yards, refineries. Each mission costs lives. Each bombing run becomes a desperate fight for survival at 30,000 feet, where the temperature drops to 40 degrees below zero and the air is too thin to breathe without oxygen. The B-17 earned its nickname Flying Fortress for good reason. 13 50-caliber machine guns bristle from its nose, waist, ball turret, and tail. On paper, it's a formidable weapon. In reality, it's a flying coffin with one critical weakness: the tail. German fighter pilots discovered this vulnerability quickly. Attack from behind from 6 o'clock, where the tail gunner sits isolated, alone, responsible for protecting the entire rear of the aircraft. 1 man, 2 guns, and a sight system that fails 8 times out of 10. The ring and post sight seemed logical to engineers on the ground. A simple device: align the enemy aircraft within metal rings, estimate distance, lead the target, and fire. But combat isn't a textbook. At high altitude, with both aircraft moving at maximum speed, with G-forces throwing the gunner against his harness, with fear flooding his system, the ring and post sight becomes useless. Tail gunners across the 8th Air Force report the same devastating statistic: less than 8% accuracy in actual combat, 8%, 92 failures for every 8 successes. Michael Romano is 19 years old. He grew up in Brooklyn, worked in his father's hardware store, never finished high school. He has no engineering degree, no technical training. What he has is something the engineers lack. He sits in that tail position, mission after mission, watching his bullets spray uselessly into empty sky while German fighters press their attacks. On his 3rd mission, Romano watches a Bf-109 rake the waist section of a nearby B-17 with cannon fire. The bomber shudders, falls out of formation, spirals toward the earth. 10 men inside. Romano fires desperately at the retreating German fighter. Every round misses. That night, he cannot sleep. The problem gnaws at him. His friends are dying. His crewmates are dying. And he's supposed to protect them, but the weapon system fails him every single time. The military gave him 2 machine guns and a defective sight. They told him to defend his bomber. They did not tell him what to do when the system fails, when following orders means watching your friends die. Romano stares at the ceiling of his barracks. Somewhere in his mind, an idea begins to form. How could one untrained gunner challenge the entire military system? And what would it cost him to try? Chapter 2. The momentary failure and the first spark of innovation. The answer comes to Romano in the most unexpected way. Not through training manuals or technical briefings, but through a reflection in plexiglass. Mission number 7. Another raid over Bremen. Romano sits in his tail position, tracking a Focke-Wulf 190 as it breaks away from an attack run. He fires, misses again. The tracers arc harmlessly past the German fighter, disappearing into empty sky. Romano slams his fist against the gun mount in frustration, then he sees it. In the curved plexiglass of his tail turret, he catches the reflection of his own tracer rounds. The glowing bullets create a visible path, a luminous trail that shows exactly where his fire is going. For a split second, Romano sees both the reflection of his tracers and the actual path of the enemy aircraft simultaneously. His mind locks onto this image. The reflection. The mirror effect. That night, Romano pulls out his logbook. He sketches frantically, trying to capture what he saw. What if he could use mirrors intentionally? What if he could create a sight system that showed him not just where he was aiming, but where his bullets were actually going. The ring and post sight forces him to estimate, to guess, to hope, but a reflective sight could show him the truth. He could see the tracer stream, adjust in real time, and walk his fire directly onto the target. Romano's hands shake as he draws. He's no engineer, but he understands the basic principle. Small mirrors positioned correctly could reflect the tracer path back to his eye. Combined with a simple reticle, he could create a sight that actually worked in combat conditions. The idea is crude, unrefined, born from desperation rather than technical expertise. But it's something. It's more than the military has given him. For 3 days, Romano obsesses over his sketches. He refines the concept, thinks through the mechanics. Where would the mirrors go? How would he mount them? What materials could he use? He needs help. Someone who understands aircraft systems, who can turn his rough idea into actual hardware. He finds that person in the maintenance hangar. Frank Kellerman is a technical sergeant, 32 years old, a former auto mechanic from Detroit. He's seen Romano around the base, knows the kid's reputation as a tail gunner who keeps coming back alive. When Romano approaches him with the sketches, Kellerman studies them silently for several minutes. "This is against regulations," Kellerman finally says, "modifying aircraft systems without authorization. They could court-martial both of us." Romano meets his eyes. "How many crews did we lose last week?" Kellerman doesn't answer. He doesn't need to. Everyone knows the numbers. 12 B-17s shot down in the last 7 days. 120 men dead or captured. "If this works," Romano says quietly, "we save lives. If it doesn't work, they court-martial us. Either way, we tried." Kellerman looks down at the sketches again. He thinks about the maintenance crews who prepare these bombers, who watch them take off knowing some won't return. He thinks about the young men who climb into these aircraft, trusting that their equipment will keep them alive. "We'll need mirrors," Kellerman says, "and we'll need to work at night when nobody's watching." Romano nods. The partnership is formed, but neither man understands yet what they're about to unleash. Chapter 3. The Challenge of Implementing Innovation. The work begins after midnight, when the maintenance hangar falls silent and the officers retire to their quarters. Kellerman leads Romano through rows of damaged B-17s, aircraft too broken to fly but too valuable to discard. These mechanical carcasses become their supply depot. "Navigation equipment," Kellerman whispers, pointing to a shattered bomber that limped back from Schweinfurt with half its crew dead. He pries open a panel, extracting small mirrors from a destroyed Norden bomb site. These are precision-ground, perfect optical quality. Romano holds one up to the dim hangar light. The mirror is no larger than his palm, but it's exactly what he needs. Over the next 4 nights, they scavenge. Mirrors from navigation systems, mounting brackets from damaged gun turrets, sheet metal from a crashed P-47 Thunderbolt. Kellerman works with the focused intensity of a surgeon, measuring, cutting, fitting. Romano assists, learning as they build. The design evolves through trial and error. Kellerman mounts the primary mirror at a 45-degree angle, positioned to catch the tracer reflection. A secondary mirror provides depth perception. The reticle comes from a broken gun sight, carefully calibrated to align with the reflected tracer path. "It's ugly," Kellerman admits, examining their creation under a work light. Military engineers would have a stroke looking at this thing. But ugly doesn't matter. Function matters. On the 5th night, they install the modification in Romano's assigned B-17. The bomber is scheduled for a mission over Wilhelmshaven in 36 hours. Romano will have one chance to prove his concept works. The installation takes 3 hours. Kellerman secures every bolt, checks every alignment, tests the mirror angles repeatedly. When he finishes, the modification is nearly invisible, tucked into the existing tail gun assembly. Unless someone knows exactly what to look for, they'll never notice it. "Don't tell anyone," Kellerman warns. "Not your pilot, not your crew. If this fails, I want deniability." Romano agrees. He returns to his barracks, tries to sleep, fails completely. The mission launches at dawn. 24 B-17s form up over England, then turn east toward Germany. Romano settles into his tail position, his modified sight waiting. The flight across the North Sea is uneventful. The bombers cross the German coast without incident. Then the Luftwaffe arrives. 6 B-109s drop from the sun, diving on the formation's rear. Romano watches one fighter select his bomber, commit to an attack run. The Messerschmitt grows larger in his sight picture, closing at combined speeds exceeding 500 miles per hour. Romano opens fire. Through his modified sight, he sees something he's never seen before, his tracer rounds reflected clearly, showing their exact path. He adjusts, walking the stream of fire toward the diving fighter. The reflection updates in real time, showing him precisely where his bullets travel. The Bf-109 flies directly into Romano's corrected fire stream. The fighter's engine erupts in smoke and flame. The German pilot pulls up desperately, trying to gain altitude, but his aircraft is mortally wounded. Black smoke trails behind as the Messerschmitt falls away, spiraling toward the earth below. Romano stares in disbelief, his first confirmed kill. After 7 missions of futility, he finally hit what he aimed at. But as his bomber returns to England, Romano realizes something troubling. His unauthorized modification worked perfectly, and now he has to explain why. Chapter 4. The reaction of superiors and the conflict of authority. The intelligence officer notices immediately during debriefing, "Romano, you're claiming a confirmed kill on a Bf-109. Your gun camera footage better support that." The footage does more than support it. The film shows Romano's tracers converging with impossible precision, tracking the German fighter, with an accuracy no tail gunner has demonstrated before. The intelligence officer watches the film 3 times, his expression shifting from skepticism to confusion. "How did you do this?" Romano hesitates. "I adjusted my aim, sir." "Adjusted your aim?" The officer rewinds the footage again. "Romano, I've reviewed hundreds of hours of tail gunner footage. Nobody adjusts like this. What are you not telling me?" The investigation begins within hours. Captain James Voss, the engineering officer, personally inspects Romano's B-17. He finds the modification within minutes, the unauthorized mirrors, the improvised reticle, the entire system built from scavenged parts and installed without permission, without testing, without any adherence to military protocol. Voss is livid. "Or do you understand what you've done?" he shouts at Romano in the hangar, his face red with fury. "You modified a military aircraft without authorization. You compromised the structural integrity of that tail section. You violated every regulation in the technical manual. I could have you court-martialed for this. I should have you court-martialed for this." Romano stands at attention, silent. There's no defense. Everything Voss says is true. Kellerman is brought in next. The technical sergeant doesn't deny his involvement. "I helped him build it, sir. If you're going to court-martial Romano, you'll need to court-martial me, too." "Don't tempt me," Voss snaps. But the situation becomes complicated when the operations officers get involved. Major William Calhoun reviews Romano's gun camera footage with clinical interest. He's flown 30 missions as a pilot, watched too many bombers go down, attended too many memorials for crews that never came home. He doesn't care about regulations, he cares about results. "Captain Voss," Calhoun says carefully, "I understand your concerns about protocol, but this tail gunner achieved what our current system fails to deliver. He hit his target. With an unauthorized modification built from spare parts," Voss counters. "We have no idea if it's safe. We have no data on its reliability. We haven't tested it under stress conditions. What happens when those mirrors shatter from vibration? What happens when the mounting brackets fail at altitude? This entire assembly could come apart and jam the guns during combat. What happens when we keep losing bombers because our tail gunners can't defend them?" Calhoun fires back. The argument escalates. Engineering versus operations. Safety versus effectiveness. Protocol versus survival. Captain Douglas Morrison, the chief maintenance engineer, sides firmly with Voss. "Gentlemen, we have procedures for a reason. If every airman started modifying their aircraft based on personal theories, we'd have chaos, we'd have crashes, we'd have more deaths, not fewer." But the combat crews see it differently. Word spreads through the barracks about Romano's kill. Tail gunners who've flown mission after mission without hitting anything suddenly have hope. They corner Romano, asking about the modification, begging to know if it really works. Can you build one for my position? How much does it improve accuracy? Will they let us use it? Romano doesn't know how to answer, because right now the military is deciding whether to implement his innovation or court-martial him for creating it. The choice seems impossible. Save lives or follow rules, but war doesn't care about impossibility. Chapter 5. Change in Luftwaffe Tactics and Rapid Adaptation. Colonel Stanley Ray makes the decision on the third day. Install it on 12 aircraft. We test for 2 weeks. If the data supports Romano's results, we expand implementation. If it fails, we remove every modification and Romano faces disciplinary action. It's not forgiveness. It's a calculated gamble. Kellerman and his maintenance team work around the clock, replicating Romano's design on 11 additional B-17s. They refine the installation process, standardize the mounting brackets, improve the mirror positioning. What took 5 nights to build the first time now takes 6 hours per aircraft. The modified bombers fly their first group mission over Kiel. 12 tail gunners equipped with Romano's reflective sight system. 12 opportunities to prove the concept works beyond a single lucky engagement. The results are immediate and dramatic. Gun camera footage from that mission shows a transformation in tail gunner effectiveness. Tracer streams that previously sprayed wildly now converge with startling precision. 3 Bf-109s go down to tail gun fire. 2 more break off their attacks with visible damage. The Luftwaffe loses 5 fighters to a position they previously attacked with near impunity. More importantly, none of the modified bombers are shot down. The intelligence officers compile the data obsessively. They measure angles of attack, count rounds fired, calculate hit percentages. The numbers tell an undeniable story. Tail gunners with Romano's sight system achieve accuracy rates above 30%, nearly 4 times better than the standard ring and post sight. But the Luftwaffe is learning too. German fighter pilots begin reporting back to their commanders about the American bombers with deadly tail defenses. Luftwaffe tactical analysts study the engagement patterns, recognize the change, and issue new directives. If the tail position has become too dangerous, attack from somewhere else. By the second week of testing, German fighters shift their tactics dramatically. The rear attacks that once dominated their combat doctrine nearly disappear. Instead, Bf-109s and FW-190s begin executing frontal attacks, diving head-on toward the bomber formations at closing speeds exceeding 600 miles per hour. These attacks are far more dangerous for the German pilots. The combined closure rate gives them less than 2 seconds to aim and fire before they must break away to avoid collision. But frontal attacks bypass the now lethal tail position entirely. Major Calhoun recognizes what's happening during a briefing with his squadron commanders. "They're adapting to us," he says, pointing to a tactical map showing attack vectors. 2 weeks ago, 80% of fighter attacks came from 6 o'clock. Last week, that dropped to 40%. Yesterday, we recorded only 15% rear attacks. They're avoiding Romano's sight system by changing their entire combat approach. Captain Voss, still skeptical, raises an objection. That doesn't prove the modification is effective. It just proves the Germans are trying something new. The Germans are trying something more dangerous, Calhoun corrects. Frontal attacks have higher failure rates. They're accepting greater risk to avoid our tail guns. That's not coincidence. That's tactical adaptation to a threat they can't overcome. The data continues accumulating. Romano flies 8 more missions with his modified sight. His personal tally reaches 6 confirmed kills, making him one of the highest-scoring tail gunners in the 8th Air Force. Other gunners with the modification report similar improvements. On Mission 14, Romano's bomber takes heavy damage from a frontal attack. The nose section is shredded, the bombardier killed, the navigator wounded. But when a Bf-109 attempts a finishing pass from the rear, Romano's guns are waiting. The German fighter explodes under concentrated fire, its wreckage tumbling past the crippled bomber. Romano's bomber limps back to England on 3 engines. That night, Colonel Ray calls a meeting with his senior staff. The test period is over. The data is conclusive. Now comes the hardest question. Does the military officially adopt an unauthorized modification created by an untrained airman? Chapter 6. mass implementation, and final recognition. Colonel Ray's decision is pragmatic, not sentimental. Gentlemen, I don't care if this sight system was invented by a 19-year-old with no engineering degree. I don't care if it violates every protocol in our technical manuals. I care about one thing: bringing my crews home alive. The data proves Romano's modification works. We're implementing it across the entire bomb group. Captain Voss makes one final objection. Sir, we should wait for official engineering analysis. We should send the design to Wright Field for proper testing and certification. We should follow established procedures. How long would that take? Ray asks. 6 months? Maybe longer. How many crews will we lose in 6 months, Captain? Voss has no answer. Ray turns to Kellerman. Sergeant, how fast can you equip every B-17 in this group? Kellerman does the math in his head. We have 36 operational bombers, sir. With my full maintenance team working, we can complete 10 aircraft per day, 4 days for full implementation. You have 3 days, get started. The maintenance hangar transforms into a production facility. Kellerman organizes his team into specialized crews. One group scavenges mirrors from damaged aircraft and salvaged equipment. Another fabricates mounting brackets. A third handles installation. Romano moves between crews, explaining the sight picture, demonstrating proper alignment, answering technical questions. The work proceeds with military efficiency. By the end of day 1, 14 bombers carry the modification. By day 2, 27. On the morning of the third day, every B-17 in the 91st Bomb Group has been equipped with Romano's reflective sight system. The first mass test comes over Bremen. 36 bombers, all carrying the modification, facing a Luftwaffe that hasn't yet realized the American defensive capability has just multiplied. German fighters attack as they always have. Some attempt rear approaches, perhaps pilots who haven't received the new tactical directives. They encounter a wall of precisely aimed defensive fire. The gun camera footage from that mission becomes legendary within the 8th Air Force. Tail gunners who previously fired thousands of rounds without hitting anything now track targets with mechanical precision. The reflective sights allow them to see their tracer paths, adjust in real time, and deliver accurate fire even against high-speed, maneuvering targets. 8 German fighters are destroyed. 14 more break off with visible damage. Only 2 B-17s are lost, both to frontal attacks that penetrate the formation before the bombers can respond effectively. The statistics speak clearly. Before Romano's modification, the 91st Bomb Group averaged 12% losses per mission. After implementation, losses drop to 5%. Tail gunner accuracy increases from 8% to 35%. The numbers save lives in measurable, undeniable ways. Word spreads to other bomb groups. Commanders request technical specifications. Kellerman's team begins producing written instructions, standardizing the design, teaching other maintenance crews how to replicate the modification. Within 6 weeks, over 200 B-17s across the 8th Air Force carry versions of Romano's sight system. Romano never seeks recognition. He doesn't request commendations or promotions. He simply continues flying missions, doing his job, using his modification to protect his crew and his fellow bombers. But on his 23rd mission, Romano's bomber takes a direct hit from German flak over Regensburg. The aircraft explodes at 28,000 feet. There are no survivors. Michael Romano dies at 19 years old, 3 months after inventing the modification that saves thousands of lives. His name appears in the casualty lists, one airman among many. The official records don't mention his innovation. No medal is awarded posthumously. The military bureaucracy that initially threatened to court-martial him never formally acknowledges his contribution, but the tail gunners know. They remember. Chapter 7. Conclusion and Reflection. The war continues long after Romano's death. His reflective sight system remains in service, quietly saving lives on every mission. Tail gunners who never knew his name benefit from his innovation. Bomber crews return home because a 19-year-old from Brooklyn refused to accept that watching his friends die was simply the cost of following regulations. The official military reports eventually acknowledge the modification, though they sanitize its origins. Technical documents refer to it as field modification, B-17, or improvised reflective sight system. The reports detail specifications, installation procedures, and effectiveness data. They do not mention Michael Romano, but history has a way of preserving what bureaucracy tries to forget. After the war, former tail gunners gather at reunions. They share stories, compare experiences, remember the men who didn't come home, and they talk about the modification that changed everything. Slowly, through oral history and personal accounts, Romano's story emerges from obscurity. Engineers studying post-war aviation technology trace the development of advanced gunsight systems back to field modifications implemented during combat operations. They find references to an unauthorized reflective sight created by an enlisted airman in 1943. They discover Kellerman's installation notes, preserved in maintenance logs. They piece together what official records tried to erase. Romano's innovation influences the design of gun turret systems in post-war aircraft. The principles he discovered through desperate observation become incorporated into sophisticated fire control systems. Modern aircraft targeting technology owes a debt to a young man who simply refused to accept that the tools he was given were good enough. The lesson extends beyond aviation, beyond military technology, beyond the specific circumstances of World War II. Romano's story teaches us that the most critical innovations often come not from experts following established procedures, but from individuals facing real problems who refuse to accept inadequate solutions. The engineers who designed the original sight system were educated, experienced, credentialed, but they never sat in a tail turret at 30,000 feet, watching friends die while their equipment failed. Romano had something the engineers lacked: direct knowledge of the problem. He understood the failure not as an abstract technical challenge, but as a life-or-death reality. That understanding drove him to innovate despite his lack of formal training, despite the threat of court-martial, despite every institutional barrier designed to prevent unauthorized modifications. The courage to challenge authority when authority is wrong. The willingness to risk punishment to save lives. The recognition that sometimes the greatest act of service is knowing when to disobey. These are not lessons taught in training manuals or military academies. These are principles discovered through necessity, forged in combat, proven through results. Michael Romano never received the recognition he deserved during his brief life. But his legacy persists in every life his innovation saved, in every tail gunner who came home because his sight system worked when the official equipment failed, in every subsequent advancement built upon his improvised solution. War demands adaptation. Survival requires innovation, and sometimes the most important breakthroughs come from those brave enough to challenge a failing system, even when challenging it might destroy them. Romano understood this. He paid the price, but thousands lived because he did.